Hello, my name is Dr. Nate Samuelson from Vallejo Health and Wellness Center, and today we're going to talk about ADD, ADHD, and other behavior and learning disorders. Now, for many of you, I don't have to explain what those disorders are because you're coming in to this presentation today knowing that your child has one of these disorders. For those of you who don't know what disorders your child might have, these are some of the most common ones that we see. This is not an inclusive list. This is just a few examples of some of the major ones that we see. So, ADD, ADHD. So yeah, patterns of impulsiveness, short attention span, hyperactivity, but also behavioral issues in regards to sometimes physical abuse. That comes out in the way of social performances. We've got autism, difficulties with social interaction, verbal and nonverbal communication, but also a narrow focus of interest. And then we've got dyslexia, which is a learning disorder characterized by problems with processing words into meaningful information. Typically, we see that with difficulty in reading. So before we really dive into the cause of these conditions, I want to ask you a question. So, if your house was burning down, and let's just imagine this is your house, who would you call? You call the fire department, right? So they come in, they bust the windows, bust down the door, save everyone inside, put out the fire. It's going to be pretty damaged afterwards, right? So would you call the fire department back to fix your house? See, it's pretty silly, right? Because the fire department has a certain skill set, they have a certain set of tools that they use in their job, and they're very good at it. Just like a carpenter is very good at repairing things and building things. But you wouldn't ask a carpenter to come and put out your house fire, unless he's a volunteer firefighter, of course. So this is the problem that we have when we look at medical doctors trying to treat chronic diseases. For example, our learning behavioral disorders. Their tools are medication and surgery. However, as many of you parents have found out, medication does not resolve the issues. It will make symptoms better, but it does not resolve the child's condition. So why then do we take the firefighter and ask them to rebuild our house? The same thing applies here. Why are we asking the medical doctor, who only has medications and surgery, to repair our child with a learning or behavioral disorder? It's no wonder there has been little to no good success following those methods. So here's some proof as to the fact that they do not have good success. So if we were to look at autism in the 1990s, that's the bottom line right there. In the 1990s, likelihood of a child with autism was 1 in 10,000 cases. Now, it's 1 in every 110. That is a significant increase. Kids with ADD, ADHD, it's 1 in 10. You have a 10% chance of having your child develop that. Huge. I don't remember if you recall when you were a kid, but do you recall many kids with ADD, ADHD in your classrooms? I certainly don't. It's because it's been on the rise since the 90s, and it's reached epidemic proportions. Dr. Melio calls it the greatest epidemic that's facing our kids. But here's one of the biggest medical misconceptions out there, is that they're saying that the rates are higher because of better diagnosing. That is partially true, but it doesn't explain the sheer number of kids with it these days. The other misconception is that it's genetic in nature. Now, it's not the fact that it's genetic, it's the fact that you can't do anything about it. You can. Let me explain why. But first, we have to start off with some neurology. We have to understand how the brain developed. So, as the infant is getting developed, and within the first 0 to 2 years of life, they're really only capable of the most basic functions. So when they come out, they can only breathe, eat, sleep, they can cry, and they can go to the bathroom. They also can control their heart rate. Those are the only things that they can really do. Because the brain is only capable of the most basic of functions. Now, any parent knows this. If you've had a kid, you know what it's like when they come out. They only have very limited capabilities. But those change really quickly. But what does the brain need in order to make these changes? Well, the brain needs two things. It requires energy, which comes in the form of glucose or sugar, and oxygen. And exercise is one of the best ways to get oxygen. Proper eating is going to give you that glucose. The last one is stimulation. The best way for kids to get stimulation is to be acted upon by gravity, so exercise, running around. That's why sitting in front of the TV is terrible for our kids. It actually is contributing to the reason why we've seen the significant shift in autistic cases, in ADD, ADHD cases. So when the baby is developing, the first 0 to 2 years of life, the right side of the brain develops. That is the side of the brain that controls big, giant movements. It's also your big picture side of the brain, but it's also where we learn our social skills, what's appropriate and what's not. We also learn how to not be completely risky with our behavior. This is the time frame where the kids with ADD, ADHD have a developmental problem. Because somewhere during this time frame, their brain wasn't able to develop fully like it should have. Now, lack of stimulation can result in a 20 to 30% decrease in that side of the brain. That's huge. So, sticking your child in front of a TV is not a good thing. But we see a preponderance of parents doing this, that they rely on the TV to become the babysitter. So let's take a look at what each side of the brain does. So if we look at the right side of the brain, it's that big picture as I said, but it's also imagination, it's present and future, it's that social skills, but it's also risk-taking and certain possibilities. But if we look at the left side of the brain, now we start looking at logic, detail, fine motor skills. We're looking at being able to distinguish patterns and perceptions and order, but also knowing objects' names. So when we look at a child with, let's say, dyslexia, we're looking at more of a left brain deficiency, because reading, so that words and language fall under the left side of the brain. So what happens is when one side of the brain doesn't work the way that it's supposed to, we get what's called a functional disconnection syndrome. So let's go ahead and picture the brain as an orchestra. So the orchestra is playing Star Wars because I like Star Wars, so we're going to go with Star Wars. But let's say the woodwind section isn't playing at the same tempo as the rest of the orchestra. Now, is that going to sound like Star Wars, or is it going to sound like some sick version of Star Wars? It's going to sound like a sick version of Star Wars. That's what happens with the brain, is that the brain can't make sense of a sick version of Star Wars. So one side is underactive. And the reason why it's most common in boys is because you have a connector between the two sides of your brain called the corpus callosum. In boys, it's smaller. And so this makes us more susceptible to changes. It makes us more susceptible to ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, autism, the learning and behavioral disorders. So we have many problems, but really one cause. So we have a brain deficiency. And you can see many of the conditions listed here. Right brain, ADD, ADHD, as I've said repeatedly now, Asperger's, autism, obsessive compulsive disorder, left brain, reading disorders, dyslexia, The inability to distinguish objects in your hand is dysgraphia. So these conditions, the commonality over all of those conditions is this. It's because of a breakdown in their foundation. Unfortunately, the reason why medication doesn't work is because it doesn't fix the foundation. It just puts new windows in this house and throws on some new paint to make it look better. But is that foundation any better? Absolutely not. The foundation starts in the brain, but it's also in your digestive system. Because as this picture on the left side here shows, is that the brain is intimately connected to your digestive system. If your brain is off, your digestive tract, your stomach, your liver, your intestines, your heart, and your lungs will not function properly. This is one of the reasons why kids have asthma issues, especially with these behavioral disorders, is because the brain is not working the way that it should. And so now the gut isn't either. And it's an endless cycle. The gut doesn't work right, which means the brain doesn't work right. And you spiral out of control very quickly. And this is the reason why foods can set a child off extremely quickly. If you cannot digest food or even absorb nutrients, you will not be able to make neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are what the brain uses to communicate with itself. When you lack neurotransmitters, your body will get it any way that it can. And one of the biggest neurotransmitters that you lack, or your child probably lacks, is serotonin. Serotonin inhibits brain function. It slows things down, which would be one of the reasons why kids with ADD, ADHD are speeding way up. It's the reason why they love their carbohydrates, the reason why they can be pretty picky eaters. Carbohydrates compensate for low serotonin. They have the same effect as serotonin, but on a reduced scale. They don't last as long. So what's the dark side of a neurotransmitter imbalance? You have addictions to carbohydrates. Children can get addicted to medications because it's fulfilling that void of a neurotransmitter. But again, these medications don't solve the problem. In fact, they actually make it worse. So when those foods that we eat, those carbohydrates that the children love, and I see this all the time, I ask the child, what is your favorite food? The vast majority of the time, it's some sort of carbohydrate that is loaded with sugar, essentially. So sugar and carbohydrates create inflammation in your body. Think of inflammation as swelling, like you sprained your ankle. If you sprain your ankle and you keep spraining it, you keep the inflammation there. And so that ankle is going to heal much more slowly. The same thing goes on with your gut. If you have lots of inflammation in your gut is not going to be able to heal itself. And so now you start getting holes in your digestive system, which allows food particles to sneak in. And this is the reason why kids develop food sensitivities. So that has to be checked. Again, inflammation is just swelling in the body. Inflammation means the body needs to heal, but it can't because there's something that's still offending it. Now, one of the reasons why gluten is the most common food to have an issue with is because it's the one that we commonly eat in childhood. If you look at the food pyramid that was created back in the early 1990s, when we saw the spike in obesity, we see that the bottom of the pyramid is grains. Was it 9 to 11 servings of grains a day? If you eat that food enough and you have that hole, eventually those food particles are going to sneak into your bloodstream and your body will attack them. But here's the other thing. There are at least 25 other foods that operate similar to gluten, and your child could be sensitive to. You could be sensitive to. And so you have to find out which ones you're sensitive to, because this could be affecting your child's learning, this could be affecting your learning, or your child's behavior, or your behavior. You would be surprised at how quickly a change can happen by removing a food that is triggering a condition. It can even happen overnight if you remove the right food. Gut health, again, is tied directly to brain health and function. So let's just take a quick peek at what a sensitivity would look like if you had one, or if your child had one. Irritability, and occasional meltdowns. Inability to focus or concentrate, impulsive actions, aggressive behavior, fatigue, bedwetting, sleep disturbances, learning disabilities, and hyperactivity. Sounds pretty much like behavioral and learning disorders, correct? Yes. It is an important component that you have to look into. So what are the causes? Lack of physical exercise, repeated antibiotic use, and I see this one over and over and over and over again. I just had another kid come in with repeated uses of antibiotics, and it sets the table for a breakdown in the digestive system, which then does not allow that brain to develop the way that it should. Absentee parenting means you let the TV be the babysitter. Televisions and computer usages have gone through the roof. Now it's iPads and iPhones. Stressful pregnancies, emotional or physical, or even if the parent was a substance abuser. And we're not talking just narcotics. We're talking alcohol, we're talking foods, you name it. And boys are more susceptible to this. Stressful lifestyles. Environmental toxins. This could be heavy metals. This could be mercury that's in the amalgams in your teeth. It could be something that's in the water. Could be something in a common food that you're eating. Or infections. These are huge. Then the last one is inadequate nutrition. Don't give the body what it needs to heal. It's not going to. So, why have other treatments failed? Well, first of all, they have not treated the foundation. So, the foundation is a breakdown in brain balance. It's a breakdown in nutrients, neurotransmitters. It's a breakdown in the ability to digest food. But if you look at the treatments, and this is from the CHAD website, parent training is what they'll do. Behavioral intervention strategies, appropriate educational program, education regarding ADD, ADHD, and medication when necessary. I thought this was an interesting quote to find there. If they are not properly medicated, children with ADHD may act out and be held back in class. Adolescents might engage in impulsive, risky behavior. Adults are at greater risk of being fired from their jobs. Sounds pretty scary, right? What parent wouldn't want to put their child on medication if they read that statement? I want to open your eyes to something. Is that statement gets compounded if you're on medication. Because Ritalin and Adderall are actually, specifically Ritalin, is considered a gateway drug because it has the effects of cocaine on a child. So, why do other treatments fail? Because they don't fix the foundation of the house. They just look at addressing the cosmetics, the symptoms, by taking the boards off the windows, and maybe doing some creative landscaping for this house. So how do we get to the root of the problem? We assess the foundation. That's through a complete functional neurological examination. Your medical neurologist will not do this. Muscle testing to find out which organ systems are off so that we can treat them with supplements. And then proper lab testing, blood, urine, saliva. We have to look at the digestive tract. We have to look at blood sugar. We have to look at sensitivities. We have to look to see if they have an autoimmune condition. We have to look to see if they have a vitamin or a neurotransmitter deficiency, so we can fix the foundation. Once we have the information, we repair that foundation with dietary modifications, supplements, oxygen, which is fundamental for the healing process of the brain. Brain-based activities to strengthen that slower woodwind section of the orchestra, to bring it back up. And adjustments are powerful at getting that brain to fire up. With this complex approach, we can resolve those issues. They don't have to be lifelong. So what are your options? You could do what other parents are doing. You can put your child on Ritalin, and they can act better behaviorally. Or you can make over their life for good, so they don't have to be on medication for the rest of their life. So you can give them what you really want for them, the best health that they can have. I really like this, is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Einstein said that. Pretty smart guy. Don't do the same thing that everyone else is doing, hoping that it's going to work for your child. I'll save you the time and the money. It won't. Get to the problem, fix the brain and the gut, and we can get your child through this. By fixing the foundation, we succeed where others fail. So they can look like this kid. I beat it. That's what we want. So, the answer to this question is no. They don't have to be. But there is no magic pill. There's no quick fixes. And unfortunately, this society that we're living in is all about quick fixes. That's the reason why medications are rampant. It takes hard work and it takes time, but it can be done. Together we can track down the root cause. Are you ready to change a life today? Are you ready to change your child's life? If so, call the number listed below and schedule your appointment. It truly was a pleasure to talk to you today. I really do look forward to interacting with you. I look forward to meeting you. I look forward to helping your child achieve something that they didn't know of before. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.